Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the December meeting of the Chair's Breakfast. I will remind everybody here that we're not being broadcast, but we are being recorded. I don't have any real remarks except to remind the committee chairs that the warrant for town meeting is open and will remain open until January 10th at 4 p.m., at which time it will be closed. We had a very productive town meeting warrant preview meeting Saturday or so ago. And last night or Monday night at the selectmen's meeting, we began to plow through the warrant articles that will be coming before us, and I know planning and other folks are doing the same thing. So, without further ado.
Sure. Brian Foles, Chair of the Climate Action Advisory Board. We weren't able to meet due to the weather last night, but the KLA, the consultants, continue to work on the Climate Action Plan. We had an open house where we got feedback on the plan from many citizens in town. I don't really have a summary on how that came out because we weren't able to have our meeting, but it's going well. And if anyone watching is interested in contributing ideas to the plan, through January we'll still be collecting ideas to put in the first version of this plan. And you can go to the town website and submit your ideas to have them put in. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Eric.
Good morning. I'm Eric Van Loon, Chair of the Tax Relief Committee. It's a committee that was created about a dozen years ago to help to enable citizens who are willing on a voluntary basis to help other citizens who are really struggling to pay Concord real estate taxes. So about a month ago, this letter went out to the usual suspects, several hundred people throughout the town, and it had a reply envelope like this. And we've been working closely, the Tax Relief Committee, with the Hugh Cargill Trust Committee, because they do the careful screening of the recipients. And a couple of years ago, we instituted a new approach where on the same piece of paper, we have an appeal from the Tax Relief Committee on one side and the Hugh Cargill Trust on the other. And citizens can indicate which or both of the funds they want to support. We've gotten a number of contributions and several tens of thousands of dollars, but the real test is around January 10th, when everybody's sending their checks for year-end charitable contributions, and you come to learn then what the real totals are for the year.
Good. Well, it's a very noble effort, and combined with Hugh Cargill, the town really does a lot to help the citizens in town that need it, plus the tax-exempt warrant article we passed a couple of years ago, also helping with property taxes. That's great. Keith.
Hi, I'm Keith Bergman, Chair of the Affordable Housing Trust Study Committee. We made a presentation at the town meeting preview and briefed the select board on Monday night. Our task of the study committee was to prepare a draft bylaw for next year's town meeting to implement the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. This year's town meeting voted to adopt the enabling state legislation. The next step is to approve a bylaw. So just some of the highlights, and I'll mention what sort of oversight these trustees would have if created. First, it would be 5 to 7 members appointed by the select board. A member of the select board would be a member of the trustees. The select board would approve the trust's policy goals and guidelines consistent with the town's adopted housing goals. And we felt that was important because it's a new kid on the block, yet it ought not to exist in a vacuum, that there are many other boards that are dealing with housing. What the town meeting was told this past year in adopting a package of 4 housing articles, including the 2 home rule petitions that were filed for funds that would go into an affordable housing trust fund, was that Concord needs predictable, sustainable revenue sources so that funds are readily available when affordable home opportunities arise. And so so our hope is that the boards that are dealing with housing will look collectively at what the goals are for housing, and then take a step back and say, based on the authority that various ones have, who's the right entity to carry out particular tasks. The trust fund would be a new source of funding for entities that want to apply for housing dollars. They would also have the authority, with the approval of the selectmen, to acquire or dispose of property for housing purposes. And we would not be the first to do it. We'd be the 109th community. So there's we took advantage of a lot of the lessons that have been learned by others. Appreciate the select board support.
May I ask a question, Mr. Chair?
Moderator.
Or actually, just to make a suggestion, that you check the town charter to be sure that a member of the town select board can actually serve on the committee as opposed to being a liaison to it.
Yeah. Okay, we'll do that. The statute requires that a select board member be
Well, I guess
on, so.
that's an interesting problem.
Yeah,
Selectmen can serve on other committees as long as the charge of the committee or the enabling legislation specifies them.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly serve on the Hanscom Area Towns Committee and so on.
Financial Audit Advisory Committee,
Yeah.
I'm the chair of that, so I can't get elected just as me, but if it says a select member of the select board, then you can do it. But we're double checking.
we'll look into that.
Yes, John?
Is it folks able to get a copy?
Absolutely. There is a form that the select board voted to insert onto the warrant on Monday night, and that can,
Look at our
Be
packet of
circulated.
supporting material for Monday's meeting. It's in there.
and we will be circulating that to, and meeting with the various housing stakeholders in the coming weeks.
We're very interested.
Yeah, we want to meet with the
There's one
CPC.
additional change that I will propose we make in it, which is a language change, and I failed to catch it Monday night, but it has language for the town uses special municipal employee to designate members of committees, and there's a different language in it. I don't know whether it's from the state. It's on page 5, it's near the
Yeah, I
end.
think the language that we used was lifted from the state statute, but it doesn't designate, that act doesn't, the bylaw doesn't designate the affordable housing trustees as special municipal employees, though, only as municipal
Municipal.
entities for purposes of the open meeting law.
Yeah.
It would still be a separate vote that the select board would need to take to designate them as
Special municipal employees. Okay, great. Good morning, Deb.
Good morning, Dr. Deborah Green, Chair of the Board of Health. On Monday, the Board of Health met and had the second public hearing regarding our proposed tobacco regulations. This was a well-attended event. I think we had probably 60 people there, including several news outlets filming and recording. And the speakers were fairly divided for and against. So at the end of the evening, the board felt that we'd heard enough evidence, and including some people who had shown up for the public hearing in November, showed up again. So we did not feel we needed an additional public hearing, and so closed it Monday evening. And so after the beginning of the year, we will meet and deliberate based on the evidence gathered.
And you expect to likely make a judgment in January?
I would doubt we would vote in January.
You doubt it?
I doubt we would vote on it in January. I would recommend the board deliberate and discuss. We have a lot of evidence that was entered in on Monday's meeting. A lot of letters of support and against. We had a nice letter from this president and CEO of Emerson Hospital in support. Chris Schuster supported our efforts. But we have a lot of material to go through, so I
So it'll take a
don't
while.
expect a vote at that meeting.
Thanks.
I'm Peter Lowett, representing the Concord Housing Development Corporation. Got a couple of active projects. 930 Main Street was conveyed to Habitat for Humanity, and we're waiting for them to start with zoning plans and community outreach. Second is Junction Village. We don't have much activity, but there's some background work going on around property taxes and the ground lease. And we've gone on record supporting the CPA article for the Concord Housing Authority project is Garrow Park, and we'll be discussing the other proposed town meeting articles that are upcoming meetings. That's it.
New news with Junction Villages, they finally got, met with the assessor to determine what the tax liability for the project would be, and it turns out it exceeded what they had in their budget by about twice what they had in their budget. So they're proposing that we designate it a certain area within town that would allow them to have their tax calculated in a different way. And so the select board will take that up and therefore reduce our tax liability. The select board briefly talked about it on Monday, but we'll be having a more robust discussion of it at our meeting on the 30th. So, and then it will likely go to, you have to have a town meeting to approve this enterprise-like zone. Morning.
Morning, Peter Hunter, Chair of the Recreation Commission. We met last evening, covered a number of topics, including listened to a presentation by the former StarMet Property Committee, Paul Bowen and Pam Rockwell, talking about potential uses of that property and getting our ideas. We are going to, assess the situation and ultimately provide some support to the use of that property. We also got caught up on a number of things that are going on in Recreation Commission. We are implementing new software. It will be effective January 1. It's going to significantly improve the user friendliness of registering for recreation activities. It's going to require everybody to kind of reprovide their information that they provided previously, including credit card information, because it gets lost in the old system. So those of you who are members of BD Center or other things will have to update those hopefully quickly, because we want to get that up and live on or after January 1. Number of great activities at Beanie Center, swim programs and fitness programs are all-time high, which is improving the membership, and an entity that was more or less losing money is doing very well and vibrant right now, and we're very happy about that. We, as I mentioned last month, we hired a new visitor center manager, Beth Williams, who's done an amazing job in 1 month. She's gotten some great promotion, doing a lot of great things around town. She's already been in Boston Globe, Herald, WBZ, AP, on really positive things about the town and the activities that she's doing. So she's going to continue to work with the surrounding towns to promote tourism, and which will help the commercial vibrancy of the town. And I think it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, in the town budget this year, the town manager is proposing to change her designated role to move more toward the concept of economic vitality and hire a part-time person who would deal just with tourism, so she would pick up the broader notions beyond tourism of retail sustainability and economic development.
She's totally capable of doing that. It makes great sense.
Good. Thank you. Matt?
Thank you.
Well, I admire the Recreation Commission. You have been able to get out last night and have your meeting. Ours was canceled. So, yeah, you must have skied there. Yeah.
They're so fit.
Exactly. Totally. So, as a result, we weren't able to complete our deliberation of the Main Street Planned Residential Development. We did have a meeting just a week before where there were a lot of members of the public. There has been some change in the site plan for that development to expand the common open space towards the front of the property, preserving more trees and also just making the public use of the common open space more practical. That said, there's still any number of issues, and as we opened our deliberations towards the end of the meeting, and there definitely is a diversity of opinions on the board, not just sort of overall, but on each of the specific points that we need to deliberate on. So I think we're going to have quite a discussion. We are trying to reschedule that meeting because the other thing that we were planning to do prior to our next meeting was to redline our remaining draft bylaw amendments. We just have the first draft in particular of the changes to the planned residential development bylaw. And I just wanted to mention what kind of changes are being proposed. So I think I may have mentioned before increasing the open space requirement from the current 25% to 35%. But in addition, we're thinking of providing some sort of density bonus if some of the following types of conditions are met, and one or more of them, which would be units that are under 2,500 gross square feet with a one-car garage, units that have a zero-step entry with a master bedroom and full bath on the first floor, and then units that were all electric appliances and HVAC systems. So the idea would be, provide some incentives. Right now, with the stretch code, we can't, mandate anything beyond that, but we could offer incentives. So that's what we're proposing. Also, there's an adjustment to the height bylaw because currently in the PRD, the height just says the height shall be no more than 35 feet, whereas in other sections of our residential bylaws, there is a special permit provision for granting relief from height. There is no such provision, and as a consequence, actually, the Main Street PRD will need to seek a variance on height.
Sure.
Which we are not, actually, it's not in our jurisdiction, but it's the ZBA will hear that, yeah. So other news is that the Thoreau Depot Business District project is getting underway. It's a study. And so there is a public forum that is being scheduled in place of our meeting on February 11th. So save the date for that. And then just, I guess, a couple of final items is that, during the town meeting preview meeting, I previewed 10 zoning bylaw amendments, and one that actually will be on the docket for this 2020 town meeting is one in which the district boundary of the Thoreau Depot Business District would be expanded. And the reasoning for that is in order to accommodate the reconfiguration of entry and exit from Starbucks.
What direction? Mind if I ask? Can I ask a quick question on that one? Because
Sure.
I saw that. What direction is the traffic going to flow?
The traffic would flow into the existing parking lot and then out
back.
around the back of the building, which would put the exit significantly further, like 130 feet further away from the intersection.
But so as somebody who lives right near that and
Yeah.
deals with the traffic from
Yeah.
there, it's the people entering the parking lot that back up into the intersection. So maybe the reverse direction would make more sense. And I think the reason is they seem to have a drive-through or some kind of thing that you can drive up to. and they want the driver's side on one side, so maybe give them leniency to go more towards the rails with that device?
Well, you know.
Okay, that's.
Yeah,
too
we're
specific,
just
but-
looking
That's
at the
good.
boundary at the moment, and you know, so we're working on that.
Okay.
Sounds like we know where you're gonna be February 3rd.
Yes.
Well, February 11th is
February
actually to
11th.
talk about February. So
I'm putting it in my calendar. as
I
we speak.
actually think that the site plan discussions around that proposed project would be more likely happening at the ZBA is my
Okay.
guess. And secondly, that this meeting on Feb 11th is about overall redevelopment of the Thoreau Depot Business District.
I'm interested in both. and
which
I'm-
is
I'm
if-
very glad to see that there's discussion.
Yeah, okay.
Well, you guys
So-
can carry this offline.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
May I raise one
Yes,
more
yes,
issue?
ma'am.
On the incentives that that the planning board is proposing, with respect to density bonuses,
Yeah,
I'll just note that we do have, one way or another, on the warrant this year, the proposed fossil fuel infrastructure bylaw.
Of course.
Which, if it were to pass, would require electric appliances, so you
And
may
would
not
make
want to
this
be
move.
giving, yeah.
well, of course, and I think that there could be amendments in the offing if that
Yeah.
happened, right?
Yeah, okay.
Right. Thank you, Matt. Wally?
So, on behalf of the school communities, I'd like to commend the Board of Health for the work they're doing, leading on this tobacco and vaping issue. Vaping is a major issue for us at the high school and at the middle school. So, and we did sign on to the resolution that was sent to the State House. Thank you. So we've, the region, we're going to vote on both budgets tonight, finalize those for the warrant. We are going to discuss whether to put a warrant article on for parking at the high school. And we have begun negotiations with the CCTA. So those are the sort of the high points of what's going on at the region. Heather would like to have been here but is unable to attend. And let me give you a sort of a quick update on where the building committee is for the middle school. There have been a number of site visits to newly constructed middle schools, some of which I'll get into later, who we selected for design, but some of which they have designed. We selected an owner's project manager, it's Hill International. Sustainability overview presented to the entire building committee. There has been discussion about community engagement, and they've created a subcommittee for that purpose. The designer was selected, it's SMMA, and they're going great guns at this point. Been a lot of activity with those folks. Ongoing development of the project charter, which is intended to memorialize key goals for the project that can serve as a guide in the future decision-making process. And timeline development is still underway, and educational visioning has begun. That's one of the things SMMA is working with the district on aggressively right now. So.
That last part is great. I know that there was a lot of excitement around another proposal on the education design, and SSMA had to step up to the plate on that topic. So I'm glad. Are the teachers involved in that process?
Oh, yeah. That's it for us.
Thank you, Wally. Madam Moderator?
Warrant closes on January 7th.
10th.
10th. Thank you. Warrant closes on January 10th.
Nice try, though.
And I think, I don't know how many of you are aware, but we because our town meeting is so late this year, we are actually overlapping with Carlisle. And so we'll be breaking with tradition and dealing with our school articles on Tuesday night instead of Monday night, in order to accommodate that schedule.
And we thank you.
it was important. And I think that for those of you who are interested, I think the select board is of the view that we should do a further experiment with electronic voting this year. So we'll see how many nights it will be, but we'll give it another try this year and give people another opportunity to experience it and give us their views on whether and how to use it.
And at our meeting on Monday, the select board voted to have no business taken up after 10:15, as you had suggested, trying to give us another 15 minutes to try to avoid a fourth night, if at all possible. We did do that. Mr. Crossley?
Yeah, I'm John Kratzley, the chair of the Community Preservation Act Committee. And we have, our draft warrant article went in on Monday, funding 10 projects. So I have the vote of the committee here that if anyone's particularly interested in who got funded and who didn't. And then the warrant article contains the actual 10 projects that were funded for a total of $1,960,000. And that's basically, we don't meet again till January. So I think our draft article will probably become our final article. There is a matter to talk to the moderator about. I have disqualified myself from many of the deliberations under the guidance of the State Ethics Commission because my wife is involved with one of the particular applications that was ultimately approved. So it makes it a little tricky how to present it at town meeting if someone particularly raises that project. So we need a discussion on what you'd like to do between myself and the vice chair.
Yeah, sounds quite solvable.
Okay, good.
Thank you, John. David?
Sorry, David Carr, Chair of the Taxpayers Committee, and we have our one order of business still ongoing. Should be on the warrant now, as you said.
Yes, we voted to put it on the warrant Monday.
Yeah. And I guess our job at this point is just to make sure that goes through. So to summarize, in a sense, renewing the means tested senior tax exemption, except that the mechanics of it are that we have to present an entirely new home rule petition to the legislature and have that passed and then go through 2 town meetings and so forth. So we'll see you at town meeting and then again.
The two changes are remove the sunset clause, which we had in the original
Yes,
bill.
since we do not want to have to continually churning this over and over.
Changing how income is calculated.
Yes.
So thank you. Jean?
Hi, Jean Goldsberry, the chair of the Commission on Disabilities. Yesterday, we held an emergency preparedness session for people with disabilities. Evan George from the Massachusetts Office on Disability came and distributed some very helpful pamphlets and information that people could fill out to have all of the information that they would need if they had to leave their home in case of an emergency. And he talked a lot about the reverse 911 and texting to 911, ways that people can get good information about what's happening. And he provided for every person who attended a really nice red backpack full of emergency water, emergency blankets. It had a little hand crank radio that also can charge a cell phone, and some hygiene items. So it was, I think, very well received. We had 28 people who attended that. So we had originally planned to have 2 of them, one at noon that was held at Minuteman Arc, and one at 3 o'clock at the Harvey Wheeler Center. And the Harvey Wheeler Center decided that they would cancel and refer people to come to the one at noon. They were concerned about the snow and people traveling and so forth. So I think it was very successful, and we were very happy with the outcome of that. And hopefully, people got good information about what to do in case of a disaster. The other issue that we're working on is the parking at the library with the new building enhancements that they're looking at. Where right now the handicap parking is designed to be a bump out on Main Street that would have parking for 2 vehicles. But there's a concern on the committee that people who are drivers but need some kind of mobility equipment have to step out onto Main Street with that and get their equipment out in order to get into the library. It seems not as safe as people are comfortable with. So we've talked with the corporation. They came and met with us, and we have a letter that Marcia wrote about concerns about other options for parking. But members are still very concerned and really wanting to see if there can be more creative solutions so that people can safely access the library. And then the third thing that we're doing is connecting with the school system and the parents at the school system, so that we can be more inclusive of children with disabilities as well.
Thank you, Jean. Sally?
Hi, I'm Sally Clutter. I chair the Hugh Cargill Trust Committee, and we meet the second Tuesday of every month. And as many of you know, we provide temporary financial assistance to the residents in town who apply to us with requests every month. We oversee 5 funds: the Hugh Cargill Trust, the Tax Relief Fund, Concord Cares, the Silent Fund, and a fund that is provided by the Concord Municipal Light Plant. So these are the 5 areas that we receive requests for. We have just recently dispersed the holiday gifts. That's part of the Silent Fund. And we did have one change this year that you might be interested in. In the past, the recipients of tax relief, of which there are about 45 residents who receive tax relief from our committee, instead of applying every quarter, which became somewhat of a clerical nightmare for the townhouse, the application now is annual. This was an attempt to more or less coordinate with the new senior program that you apply for annually. So basically, we're going along. That's fine. That's all there is. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Todd?
Hi, pardon me. Excuse me. Todd Benjamin, Chair of the Capital Planning Task Force. We've had 2 meetings for the task force, so we're in the phase of ramping up. Our focus is really on dealing with a lot of perhaps misconceptions about the committee. So, for example, in conversations with folks, some people have said, well, I hear that you're going to be developing a permanent standing committee for capital planning. Well, our charge is to focus on the process, and that's something that we're really trying to focus on. Is our focus is on coming up with a process, not necessarily. Perhaps it will be a permanent standing capital planning committee. Perhaps it will be something else, but that's not preordained. And our other focus is on really just trying to make sure that we're all on the same page as to what this means in terms of what does the process look like, and that's what we're moving forward on. Some people have said, well, are you going to offer something at town meeting? Our understanding is that when you come up with a process that we don't need to offer anything at town meeting, and in terms of a warrant, because it's a process that will then be recommended to the select board, and the select board will go forth from there. So that's kind of where we are at this point in terms of dispelling and talking about some of these rudimentary basic constructs, and then we are in the process of reaching out to other communities to see what they do for their capital planning task force or capital planning needs, and then we hope to have something to the select board maybe by the March 1st deadline. That seems very tight, but it would be nice to be able to wrap it up by then, but we're cautiously optimistic.
Thanks, Todd. Dean?
I'm sorry for my tardiness. My dog ran away in the town forest this morning, so I had to go run it down. So-
The important thing though, do you have your dog back?
Yes, although that was a challenge. I was way off trail and, just doing whatever I had to do to go find it. Anyway, so the Finance Committee is doing the basic block and tackling right now and has just completed its guidelines process, so we've set a final guideline. This year we had a different process than we've had in years past. We set something we call the sustainable growth rate way back in July, and that sort of helped us frame our conversation about setting the guideline this year for the operating budgets. In addition to that basic work, we've also held a public hearing. The public hearing was to sort of explain to the community what this new sustainable growth rate for taxes metric is that we're using as a guidepost as we frame up our conversation about setting the financial guidelines for the operating budget. So we finished that, and now we're going to have to step into evaluating warrant articles and do our regular spring work of holding hearings, etc. So we're just on our way.
Great, thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? Thank you for coming. Happy holidays to everybody. We'll see you the third Wednesday of 2020 in January.